Hello from Chicago. I'm Raymond Simms, and this is the Raymond Simms Show on the Coliseum Sports Network. This episode is part one of a two-part series on NBA free agency. We'll kick things off today in the Eastern Conference, and on Friday, we'll do the Western Conference. But before we get into that, let's do a little advertising. This show is brought to you by Simms Coliseum. You can check out the website, a sports blog covering a lot of sports, both real and fake. You can check that out at www.simscoliseum.com. Be sure to check out the Coliseum Baseball Tournament coming to the Coliseum Sports Network. The first two games will be here on YouTube. The Cubs at the Tigers and the Astros at the Athletics. It is a two-region double elimination tournament, and then the winners of those regions face off in a best-of-7 series. It should be a lot of fun. Hopefully you tune in for that. And then coming this fall, the United Basketball Clubs. So be sure to check that out. More details will be forthcoming on that as we move closer to opening day. So with that out of the way, let's talk about some real-life basketball, the NBA Eastern Conference. Last year, not fun to watch NBA Eastern Conference basketball. Miami was really the top team from start to finish for the most part. They rested a lot of their players throughout the season, but they still were around the top. And eventually they ended up being the champion of the conference, only to fall apart against the well-oiled machine that is the San Antonio Spurs. So coming into this season, a lot of Eastern Conference teams wanted to make some splashes, want to make some changes so that they can better contend for themselves and then for the sake of the conference and making it more competitive, because last year it was tough to watch. It was very clear who the have and have-nots were. So there were some very key pieces that were moving around, and their decisions as far as free agents really have affected the landscape of some of the other teams that have had to work around these other players' decisions. And I'm going to cover a couple of the big stars today, and then I'm going to talk about one team that I think people should keep an eye on that also was making some noise here in the free agency. Well, I guess they weren't making noise because a lot of people I don't think have noticed the type of changes that they have made. Of course, the first person I'm going to talk about here is LeBron James. And of course, because he's, best player in the game, he made a very big decision that's going to have a lot of ramifications moving forward. And his decision was to go back home to Northeast Ohio after 4 years and 2 championships in Miami. Now, first and foremost, this decision by LeBron James, it surprised me, to say the least. I figured that when he left in 2010, that was it for him in Cleveland, with the type of anger and bitterness and vitriol that a number of Cleveland fans and even Dan Gilbert in his letter showed towards LeBron. I figured that the bridge was burnt when he became a member of the Miami Heat, and then even more so when he was winning his championships. I figured that he'd have to adopt Miami as his second home and just ride that out until retirement through thick and thin. Not so much, apparently. I guess for one, the fact that he did go back home, he tended to over the summers. So much for that, him not being able to go back to Northeast Ohio. He was very much able to, and able to walk around and live as a Northeast Ohioan. But also the fact that a lot of people in his circle wanted to go back. His wife, a lot of his agent, Rich Paul, a lot of people in his entourage, they were getting homesick. Couldn't deny that. And so I guess LeBron took that into account, as well as what he wanted to do moving forward. Of course, he highlights all the reasoning behind his decision in his conversation with Lee Jenkins that was transcribed and then printed in Sports Illustrated. He gives all of his reasons why he went back, and it makes sense when you think about the reasons that he highlights for going back to Cleveland, at least for me. A lot of people who tend to be cynical kind of see it either as some sort of more so as a business decision or paying lip service to Cleveland fans, but none of that really matters to me. I'm not too cynical about it. I think he genuinely wanted to go back to his hometown and he was good with his time in Miami, and he can move on and move back home and try to do the same thing for his hometown. I think that was genuine, and even if it wasn't, it doesn't matter. He's there now. Whatever. Now, what does this mean? In my opinion, of course, you got to put Cleveland at the top of the conversation. Any team with LeBron James on it is in the conversation. If LeBron James was on a team by himself, that team is in the conversation for the NBA championship. But he doesn't have to do it by himself, in a literal term at least. He walks into a pretty good roster that was slowly building. And if this didn't happen, if he didn't sign with Cleveland, this team would have had to develop on its own. And it would have been interesting to just see them continue to develop just as a team coming out of the ashes. Because, of course, they had Kyrie Irving, but they also had some pieces that they drafted. Of course, they got Andrew Wiggins through the draft with their pick this season. So there were already pieces coming in, and this just would have been a slow build. This just kicks it even more into action. So you have good developing players, and you have the greatest player in the game. I think that's a good combination for a championship contender for sure, especially a team that, with developing players, also had a star in Kyrie Irving that's developing. So now you have Kyrie and LeBron. That's already trouble. But then you have some good role players like Tristan Thompson and Anderson Varejao up front. You have some young guys like Anthony Bennett and, well, for now at least, Andrew Wiggins. We'll see what happens with that. So you have that in place, and that's already a very good sign for a championship contender. We'll find out if Kevin Love ends up being traded to Cleveland. I don't think that Cleveland should trade Andrew Wiggins. I mean, just let him develop under LeBron. If you want to give Andrew more minutes, you can put him in the 2 spot and do what you will with Dion Waiters, who's probably the starter, at least, right now, since we're so far from training camp. But I think Wiggins should stay and develop under LeBron because, hey, who else would you rather learn from? But if Kevin Love comes, that just makes him even more of a contender in the East. But I just think that, LeBron walked into a very good situation. So coupled with the fact of what he just wanted to do for his own karma, he also just helped this Cleveland team, kickstart their rebuild from the ashes they were left in, when LeBron left. Now, what does this mean for the team that LeBron did not sign with, the Miami Heat? I was like a lot of people coming out of the finals that felt that there was nothing to worry about as far as LeBron and free agency. When he opted out, when Dwayne Wade opted out, when Chris Bosh opted out, you figured it was just to give Pat Riley more room to bring in some players for slightly higher prices instead of just trying to get all these old veterans on the cheap. But as that turned out with LeBron, it was a more serious decision for him. But then once that decision was made and that first domino fell, it looked like Pat Riley was in trouble. Because keep in mind, after the big three opted out, and as well as everybody else's contract running out, for a while there, Norris Cole was the only player on the Miami Heat under contract. If he goes to the gym to work out, that would count as a Miami Heat team practice, at least for that time being. But Pat Riley was able to wrangle it all back in. He was able to get Dwayne Wade back. He got Chris Bosh back, a little more pricey than he probably would have wanted. And then, of course, they signed some other guys. Got Josh McRoberts, Danny Granger. You draft Shabazz Napier, so on. Or you trade for Shabazz Napier, who was drafted by Charlotte. So, Pat Riley was able to figure some things out. He even brought in Luol Deng, former Bull, Cavalier there for a very short while. So he was able to work things out. And with the current roster as constructed, as I look at it, I still think that they can bring some fight in the Eastern Conference. Now, considering the roster makeup of Cleveland and another team that I'm going to get to shortly, I think Miami will be on the outside looking in terms of who will come out of the East. But this team is not in rebuilding mode, for sure. They have developed a good team that should be good for a 4 or 5 seed, in my opinion, at least just right out of the gate here, or a 3 seed even. Somewhere 3 to 5, somewhere nice like that, because of some of the pieces that they were able not just to bring back, but some of the pieces that they were able to bring in. Guys who had made a name for themselves on other teams in the past, maybe haven't brought the same production lately, but here's their chance. And I think this is the chance for the guys who were on the team in the finals that fell to the Spurs, for them to prove that, you know what, that series, it was a fluke. We tried to get it going and we just couldn't. We saw LeBron going out there giving his all. We wanted to do the same, but it just wasn't there. San Antonio outclassed us, but we're coming back with a vengeance. This is their chance to prove that, and to really push forward and make a name for themselves without LeBron James. Chris Bosh, people looked at him as the third wheel. When you think about the big three, Chris Bosh was the third guy. Well, now he's the second guy. So he'll be able to step up and do his thing. Dwayne Wade, all that explosiveness, all that crashing he did in his early years, going through the lane and all of that, he can't do that anymore. So will he reinvent himself as a player after sitting out all those games last year and then coming into the finals and just looking horrible? Will Wade be able to bring himself back as it's now his team once again? Those will be some interesting questions to answer, but I think that the Heat will answer at least a fair amount of them. I think this roster, as it stands, is productive enough to have a decent seed once the Eastern Conference playoffs roll around in April 2015. Now, another big name free agent, essentially the second domino to fall in the free agency market, was Carmelo Anthony. And his decision was between going back to the Knicks for a crazy amount of money, or going to teams such as the Lakers or the Mavericks or the Rockets or the Bulls. Now, the Western Conference teams, not Dallas. Dallas wasn't able to give him a lot of money. The Lakers were, because they were another team that essentially had no one on their roster but Kobe. Was able to give them a large amount of money. But for the most part, nobody was giving Carmelo as big amount of money as the New York Knicks. And so he decided to do that. He decided to take the money and re-sign with the New York Knicks. So he'll get about $122 million, to my understanding, over the course of however long that contract is. And of course, that fits into the convenient narrative that Carmelo Anthony is about his money, or at least that he's about his money in a negative sense. I'll say that because, people are more tuned in with Carmelo than me. And he probably is. He probably is a big fan of money. And when you see the money that New York was offering him in relation to other teams, I'd be about that money too, quite honestly. And it was also not just the money, I'm sure. I mean, it was a lot of it. For one, a lot to be turning down that I think a high majority of people would also take just in their regular, if it was with their jobs or if they were in his shoes, they would take. But also his family was there. There was always the rumors about his wife wanting to stay in New York. So why not do it for a big amount of money, playing 41 games a season in the world's most famous arena in a city that you love? Why not just stay there? He went around, he was wine and dine. I'm sure he enjoyed that. He probably seriously considered all of the teams. Up until right when he resigned, he was thinking about Chicago very, very deeply. But in the end, he went ahead. He wanted to keep his family in New York. He loves New York. He loves Madison Square Garden. And I'm sure he loves $122 million over the course of however many years, because why wouldn't he? Quite honestly. And of course, the knee-jerk reaction when Carmelo re-signed with New York was to say that that Carmelo sold himself out, that he was going to a team with nothing, and that he just didn't care about contending for a championship. And I'm not saying New York are a championship contender. They are not by any stretch of the imagination. Not in 2014, 2015. However, I will say that the New York Knicks roster is not as bad on paper as I thought that they were. I think we've been blinded by injuries. I think the injury bug has hit the Knicks hard for a number of years. Well, at least for recently. You can't explain those middle years in the middle 2000s. Those weren't just injuries. That was just a bad team. But at least recently with Carmelo, I think his teams have been negatively affected by injuries to key contributors. So then you force those backups that could be great in backup roles to take on bigger tasks than you want them to. But assuming health, and that's all you can do in the summer, I think that the New York Knicks are capable of breaking into the playoffs there, perhaps as a 7 seed or 8 seed, or if you really want to get frisky, a 6 seed. But and the reason I say that, the New York-Dallas trade plays a huge part in that. The one that brought in guys like Samuel Dalembert and Jose Calderon and Shane Larkin. I think that bodes very well for the New York Knicks and what they're trying to do. I think those are very good contributing players. You also have Iman Shumpert coming off of his health issues and some production issues as well. Hopefully he can turn it around. But of course, there's J.R. Smith behind him, who's both fun to watch when he's hot shooting the ball, and then he's also just fun because he's crazy and has his personality. And then you have Amari Stoudemire, who also has injury issues. He's not going to be the same guy that posterized Michael Olowokandi in 2003. However, towards the end of last year, when he was starting to make his way back, he was showing some signs. He had some double-doubles in there. And as long as he's scoring and rebounding and with a little bit of defense thrown in there, he can definitely be a very integral part of the New York Knicks being in the playoff conversation. You also couple it with the guys that are behind Carmelo. You got Tim Hardaway Jr. and his development. And then you have Cleanthony Early, who's an interesting wild card. People fell in love with him at Wichita State, but he was under a system, a very successful system, of course, but a college system, and you know how that can be for certain players and their athletic development at the pro level. But we'll see. Cleanthony Early, himself a New Yorker, if I'm not mistaken, he's probably going to be motivated to do his best, not just because he's a rookie, but because he's close to home and just because of the player that he is. So we'll see what that means in terms of production. So this team is not as bad as I thought when Carmelo made his decision to sign with the Knicks. Like, this isn't a dumpster fire here. This isn't the 76ers going on here. This team can make it into the playoffs, and, as long as Derek Fisher isn't a Jason Kidd with all the conniving he does and is at least has something in place of a system, I think that this team can cause some problems for whoever they face in the playoffs. Now, again, let's talk about the team that the big star didn't sign with, and we're talking about the Eastern Conference. So we'll stick with Chicago here. And any team with Carmelo Anthony, I think it would have been great for them. Not a championship contender like if you add LeBron necessarily, but for Chicago and who they have, if Carmelo came on, that would have been huge for Chicago. If they got everything they wanted, if he signed for much less money than what he was offered in New York and didn't have to give up Taj Gibson, this team would be fierce, and I would give them the advantage over Cleveland for the championship. But that's not what happened. So they had to get creative, and I think that they did, and I think that still puts the Bulls in Eastern Conference championship contention. To make that delineation there. The Bulls signed Pau Gasol. They brought over Nikola Mirotic finally. He's been drafted by the Bulls for a while. And with a lot of these European players, I'm never sure when they're going to come over. But Nikola, he's coming over. There's also some smaller additions that the team has made. They re-signed Kirk Heinrich. They're in talks with Aaron Brooks. It's not official yet that he's coming to the Bulls, but he'll be somebody that'll be coming in soon enough, according to reports. And, of course, Derrick Rose and his return. A lot of people, it seems, are being very conservative about the Chicago Bulls, and the huge reason because of that is Derrick Rose. I think everybody is afraid that Derrick Rose is going to get hurt again, or that the injury is going to affect his, that the coming off of this second injury is going to affect his production. And it's fair enough. I mean, it's human nature. For instance, for like Bulls fans that are being conservative about their prediction about where Chicago is, it's understandable. It's human nature to be afraid of being hurt. You don't want to predict Chicago as a championship contender, and then Derrick Rose gets hurt the third time, and then that just ruins the team, for instance. I am not afraid to go out on that limb, because like I just did with the Knicks, I have to assume health. Unless you're Greg Oden, then I assume you're going to get hurt. But that's of course that's not fair to Greg. But with Chicago, I have to assume health, and I have to assume that Derrick Rose will produce his 20-plus points a game, 25 points a game. I don't know how he's going to do it. I would hope that he had the presence of mind to work on a jump shot through all of this rehab. I suppose that we'll see glimpses of it at the Basketball World Cup coming up in a month or two. I don't remember if it's in late August or if it starts in September. But when he's playing for that team, we'll probably see flashes of his new game. Hopefully he knows better nowadays than to just charge through the lane like he's invincible. That he may not be as explosive as he was, but that's all optimism for me. The Bulls, as they are behind Cleveland, in my opinion, as with the chance to come out of the Eastern Conference. So, and that's, with the addition of Pau Gasol and with even the smaller additions that this team has made, because with Derrick, they have so much depth. They have a lot of it going on with like Doug McDermott that they drafted, and Tony Snell is trying to develop into a contributor as well. You got Jimmy Butler, who gives out his all the time. He's going to have to be more of a shooting guard. A lot of people were set here in the Chicago area that Carmelo didn't come because this team has been hurting for a two guard that can score. I mean, we haven't had one of those since Ben Gordon, but a lot of people have wanted that to happen, and we haven't gotten it. But I mean, they don't grow on trees. So what you have to do is you have to be creative. You have to work around that. You get a stretch four instead in Pau Gasol, who can score as well. I think he'll be a better second scorer than Carlos Boozer, who all told put in some decent production. He'd get his double-doubles, but he was a huge liability on defense, and he wasn't always consistent with those double-doubles. I think Gasol will be a teensy bit more consistent, and he's a little bit better on defense. He's long enough that he can help be a good team defender. As long as Pau contributes his 15 and 10, I think I tweeted on Twitter about a couple weeks ago around the time of his signing, I wanted 19 and 10. But he's been averaging about 17 and 9.5 as of late. But, if he gets, 15 and 10, I think that should be good enough, along with Joakim Noah and what he does to contribute to Derrick Rose and what will hopefully be his redevelopment into a all-star player. Maybe not MVP caliber, but just somebody that's, good enough to lead his team to higher heights. His team is very good in the regular season under Coach Thibodeau, but now it's about that time to show and prove in the playoffs. So Cleveland, Miami, Chicago, and New York are all very interesting cases. I think they're all playoff bound at this point in time. But there's another playoff bound team that I don't think a lot of people are paying attention to. And they've been, I don't even know how sneaky they've necessarily been. It's not like they've been doing this under the cloak of darkness, but I don't think I just think because of the lack of star power, a lot of people just haven't paid attention to what they've developed. And that is the Washington Wizards. The Wizards will head into this season being led by John Wall. John Wall is a player that when I used to do college sports radio, I had a co-host who felt that John Wall was a bust. This was 3 years ago. And I didn't think he was. He suffered from a really tough injury there early on in his career. And I felt that whenever he got going and had a team built, around him or behind him, that his true talent would show. And that's exactly what happened. And here we are today. This team seems to be on the cusp of something really good. Now, as long as LeBron James is around and I suppose Derrick Rose is healthy, that's an if. Maybe there's a ceiling there for the Wizards, but you don't know that for sure. Especially with the rumblings that have been coming around about Kevin Durant coming to 2016. But we'll talk about that down the line. Right now, Washington is developing into a very good team, and John Wall's finally being recognized for the star player that I felt that he was. A lot of people felt that he was. Maybe it took a little while than people would have liked, but here he is. He's here now. That's all people really need to worry about. Of course, his tag team partner in the backcourt is Bradley Beal, St. Louis's very own. But then up front, it gets interesting when you get Nene Hilario and Marcin Gortat up front. But the big signing for them was Paul Pierce. And that was personally a surprise for me. I figured that Pierce was just going to stay in Brooklyn along with Kevin Garnett. And, they're just going to ride out their career. But apparently Paul Pierce felt that Washington was a better choice. Where he is now, of course, you would peg him as a starter. But he'll be mentoring some up-and-coming small forwards. You got Otto Porter Jr. and you have Glenn Rice Jr. So there's going to be a senior mentoring the juniors. But I think that could be valuable for both Otto and Glenn. And then you will hopefully get some production from Paul Pierce. But even if you don't, the other four players in that starting lineup, they're pretty good themselves. So it's not like Paul Pierce has to go out there and score 20, maybe 10, and just really, really good defense and maybe hitting some key shots like he did with Brooklyn in that game one there in Toronto. So you never know, but I think that Paul Pierce was a huge addition for the sake of the locker room more so than any sort of production that he necessarily brings, not that he even really has to. But Washington not only adding Paul Pierce, but also adding a little bit more depth up front. You get DeJuan Blair, who due to his condition, where can't quite remember what it is off the top of my head, but I know it deals with his knees. A lot of people were scared away from that in the draft, but then San Antonio took a flyer on him. He ended up being one of the rising stars in the NBA. He's kind of plateaued a little bit, but he's still a very good contributor, and he's been brought in to the Wizards to back up Nene Hilario. They also brought back Drew Gooden, who found the fountain of youth just there in the playoffs with Washington and late in the season when he was picked up. And then you also add Chris Humphries, who himself has also kind of hit a lull in the past 2 years. I suppose injuries might have something to do with that. But for a while there, at least during his whole that whole scandal with the Kardashians and how long he was or how long he wasn't married with one of them. Back then, he was good for 10-10. And again, he doesn't need to do that because Marcin Gortat is starting in front of him. But if he can still, get some key shots in the post and pull down some boards when he comes off the bench, that should be good enough. So with DeJuan Blair and Chris Humphries, you add some good bench help, health permitting. If you force these guys into a starting role, then the Wizards could be in trouble. But in terms of just depth and spelling Hilario and Gortat for however long they need to, I think that this team is in good shape. Or I think that Blair and Humphries can be very helpful, and that the Washington Wizards are in good shape, especially when you have Bradley Beal and John Wall developing, especially with Bradley Beal, who is just coming in and has been producing for a decent team, as opposed to John Wall, who had to come in and deal with some very interesting Wizards teams, and he would get hurt every so often. So his rise to superstardom was a little stunted there before it's taken off how it has. But with Beal and Wall and the young players that in Otto Porter and Glenn Rice Jr. and Martell Bennett that are being developed, and then you got some help up front with DeJuan Blair and Chris Humphries, and then you just have the mentorship and locker room presence of Paul Pierce. Washington's going to be somebody to watch out for, and they're going to be there. I think they're going to be there tussling with Miami and Toronto for those middle spots between 3 and 5. So that's going to be very interesting. I consider Washington, considering where the Wizards are based, I consider them a sleeper agent. Let's call them that. But that's a look at the Eastern Conference and their free agency picture there. As I said earlier, on Friday we'll cover the Western Conference, which hasn't had as much movement, but there are some teams that made some key moves, and then there's one team I'm kind of disappointed in, but we'll get to all that on Friday. I do thank you for tuning in. Be sure to like and subscribe here on YouTube. Be sure to like my Facebook page and follow on Twitter and on Tumblr. All those are called Simms Coliseum. Should be perfectly easy to find. Leave some comments about your opinions on NBA free agency down in the comments, and I just thank you for tuning in. Have a wonderful week.